but I'm gonna go ahead and say that Solana flips Ethereum in the next couple of years, if not this cycle.
I'm a little bit doubtful or skeptical rather of a Solana ETF.
So the saying goes, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But in the case of crypto conferences, everything that happens at these conferences usually translates to market conditions. So that's why it's so important to understand what's happening at these conferences. So today we're going to talk to some of the industry experts that are going to all these conferences all of the time. They're going to share their information. What's the sentiment like? What are the narratives that really stood out? And what projects should we be paying attention to? Full disclosure, none of this is financial advice, and my work on this channel is separate from my work at Certic. So with that out of the way, let me make a quick introduction to Alberto of Bitwave. Bitwave is bridging the gap between traditional accounting and the world of digital assets. Partners and clients include Coinbase, Polygon, Ripple, VFriends, just to name a few. And I also have Max here, who's a regular on the channel. Max is with Phi Labs, which is a core contributor to Archway. And Archway is the app chain, one of the app chains in the Cosmos ecosystem that rewards their builders. Core contributors come from really big names like OpenSea, Tendermint, and Ethereum Consensus, just to name a few. And fashionably late here is Kobe of Eucalyptus Labs. Kobe's been a long time friend of mine as well, and Eucalyptus Labs is on a mission to connect everyday users to emerging tech through their software products. They've got one right now they're working on, which is a Koala wallet, and it's pretty user-friendly from personal experience. So welcome, gentlemen. Thanks so much for taking the time to have this conversation about conferences and how it translates to market conditions. Let's go ahead and just start with just the overall macro level. What was your take of the overall energy level when you went to Consensus 2024? Alberto, we can get started with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think consensus this year was pretty interesting. It was a little different vibe from previous years. I think, especially these previous 2 years, I think it was more builder focused. Saw a lot of infrastructure projects being built, new ideas. And this year, I feel like it was more institutional focused, especially with a whole bunch of like regulations, being thrown around and then canceled and vetoed after. And then there's also been like the Bitcoin, Ethereum ETFs, and I think a lot of this more traditional finance is finally making some noise because they're starting to have that clarity, and I think more of this institutional and in the future, retail adoption, I think will come with it, and I'm kind of bullish on that based on this year's consensus.
Interesting that you mentioned the institutional aspect because I feel like Consensus in general is a little bit more institutional focused than dev focused, like the ETH Denvers of the world or ETHCC. But would like to hear from Obi. What are your thoughts of the overall sentiment? Were people excited at this conference? Because usually that translates to market conditions. So what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. If anything, you can tell that I'm a bit residually tanned, or rather red, after such a fun week with really high energy levels. I've been lucky to have attended Consensus back in 2017 when it was online in 2019, a few of the years between then and now. And you can really always tell where you are in the market by how many people are on the conference floor every day at it, even though they're a bit maybe still tipsy from last night's networking event. But just by the energy they bring, the pride they have when they're wearing their company's shirts, after wearing that through the past bear market. So a lot of familiar faces from the past years who are kind of grateful just to still be there with a market of such churn of all the people you see and don't see. Archway and even you, Alberto, familiar faces from Bitwave and many more who can kind of look at each other from across the conference floor and nod and just smile without even walking up to shake each other's hands of like, hey, I know you were here when the prices had a zero less from the number, and I respect you for sticking around. So excellent energy. Pretty good side events as well, which is always helpful for bringing up that networking and that energy in general. And yeah, thanks again for having me, Mikhail.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, you mentioned the energy levels because I feel like no matter what is happening outside of that conference, that convention center, it's always going to be high energy inside. Because I remember when the whole FTX collapse happened and I was watching CNBC and they were reporting live. I want to say it was from ETHCC. This lady was standing in front of the convention center and the reporters in the studio were asking, well, what's it like over there? And she's like, Well, honestly, there's nothing that's changed. Everyone's just focused on building. I mean, that was her exact words, and I feel like a lot of times it doesn't necessarily phase what's happening, which really shows the strength of the market long term, right? Right. So, Max, what are your thoughts about what you experienced? What's the overall sentiment from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's like when you're actually in the events, the sentiment is always pretty high. I think everyone's there trying to meet new people, figure out, what the latest kind of things that are happening in the space are. So you really don't notice whether or not it's a bear market or a bull market when you're in the actual events, just because everyone's excited. And I kind of do agree with what Alberto said earlier. With it felt a lot more institutional than in the past. And to your point, Michaela, it typically is a more institutional conference. So that wasn't super surprising. But it did feel like there was like a lot less applications and like even infrastructure that was at the conference, and it was even more or less services, wallet providers, custodial providers, things like that, which was a bit of a difference, I'd say, than in the past. But yeah, overwhelmingly, it was a good time and a lot of institutional presence, and even from just more of your, I guess, bigger players that you're not used to seeing, like Visa. That is what I would say more mainstream attending the conferences. So that was nice to see, and it definitely feels like we're heading in the right direction in terms of getting that adoption from some of the more normal consumer Web2 businesses.
So it sounds like what you guys are saying is that the focal point was around institutions. It was around regulation. I heard some of that infrastructure. So the concern that I have around that is in terms of where we are in the cycle, right? There's a lot of debate around this. We're in a halftime. We're in crossroads. Depending on who you ask, they'll give you a different answer. But I do notice that during the quote unquote bear markets, that's when the focus does tend to be a little bit more on the infrastructure, right? Because this is what we need in order to support all of these applications that are being built. Is that kind of if you're trying to analyze where we are in the market, is that a little bit of a red flag for you guys in terms of like where we are? Like, is this still the bear market in some ways? Alberto, what do you think?
I think we're getting out of it. I'm really excited because I think the institutional adoption is just going to bring the market higher. As far as which ecosystems would succeed, I mean, that's up to the market to decide. But yeah, I think I'm really bullish, especially right now after the conference, and just institutional adoption is what I really like about it, and hopefully retail in the near future. I mean, what happened today with Robinhood buying, I don't want to get the name wrong, an exchange today. So so I think like, with that, not just with the institutional adoption infrastructure plays that was being built over the past 2 years, I think now we're starting to see that fruition of institutions bringing real retail adoption. I, I think I'm pretty bullish for this market sentiment going forward.
Yeah, I did hear about Robinhood buying out an exchange. Forgot the name of it as well. It's one of the bits. There's so many of them. But yeah, I want to say that they made that purchase, which is very ironic, right? Because they were so concerned about the SEC and the regulation, and here they are now buying an exchange. It seems pretty bullish. Kobe, what are your thoughts? Is this focus around infrastructure, at this conference, does it tell us that it's still very, very early?
Yeah, I like to view these crypto cycles in more terms of waves, and each 4, 3, 5 year cycle, you can say the wave gets bigger and bigger. And I guess to continue this poor analogy or metaphor, we're trying to keep as much water in terms of the builders and as much water in terms of the retail consumers and the institutional investors in there, kind of lock that water in once you have the wave come in and the water go out. And more infrastructure means more people staying there. When Robinhood buys Bitstamp, and my memory is not that good, I just did a Google. When they buy Bitstamp, that's a form to me of them trying to retain more people who last cycle may have gotten in and left, but now they can help more people onboard into crypto assets, whether that's just keeping 1% of their 401k funds eventually there, or if it's aping into different types of meme coins and really getting them fully involved with the 2009 ethos of, control your keys, control your coins, control your finance, take over the power from these institutions. So even though these institutions are getting people into crypto in a way that might be a bit antithetical to the underlying core ethos of crypto, it's undeniable that they're still ushering more and more people to this landscape and seeing these ideas of decentralization, of controlling your own assets, data, information, and more. And I think overall, I always get super excited. Back in 2017, I guess it was 2018, the bane of Consensus's existence was all the Deloitte guys walking around in their wooden or glasses with the vests on. And I remember being, I guess I was 17, it was my first or second conference, and just being like, this is pretty strange. You have the Dogecoin enthusiasts, and then you have these IBM Hyperledger people and Deloitte advisors and PwC just dipping their toes in. They're either going to be here next year, or they're going to say this is a scam and they're going to run for the hills. And they were there the next year, they were there the next year. And at this point, you don't really see that anymore. Instead, you get the same type of professionals from those companies who now camouflage in with the rest of our crypto people because they are the crypto people from back in the day. So I just think it's a great sign for both the crypto builders on the edge of how do we bring all the power out of the banks into the users' hands, and on the other side of that pole of the banks who are saying, how do we profit off of crypto assets and this new hype wave? I think it's all great for the ecosystem as long as retail consumers and builders are aware of it and vigilant with what they're building and providing to each other. So the more infra, the better, especially as a technology provider. It makes the prices cheaper. So let's bring it on in.
Yeah, I think if you're on the retail side and you're wanting to know like what tokens are going to do well, and you're just studying up, crypto as a whole, I think you need to understand that, the infrastructure is what's going to support and propel that. And it's important to understand that it's still very early in the game, in my humble opinion. I feel like this conference was about getting together and figuring out, okay, how do we onboard, all the retail users, right? Everyone's trying to figure that out. Max, do you share the same sentiment? Like, do you feel the focus on infrastructure is a sign that it might be very early on in the market? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's early on in the market cycle. And I do think that typically when you see the institutions or I guess VCs getting involved, it is not necessarily towards the end of the cycle. They're not normally investing at the end of the cycle. It's normally what's kind of starting to lift that cycle up. And it did feel like a lot of people were looking to deploy capital into different projects. So to me, that is a bullish signal. And to be honest, with just the general discourse happening outside of the conferences, if you look at mainstream media, it doesn't feel frothy by any means. In fact, almost the opposite. You almost aren't hearing much about Bitcoin at all, despite the fact it's approaching 70,000. You may see some of these investor shows that are on CNBC and what have you might be talking about it briefly, but really it's because it's more on the regulation side and the fact that a lot of people are becoming more aware of this industry and becoming more aware that it's likely going to be around for a while. And that to me is a really good signal. It's not like everyone is, that top signal where it feels like everyone's talking about it and everyone's saying it, Bitcoin's going to 100K or 200K, whatever. It's more or less just how do we regulate this in a way so that we can get more adoption. And when you see major institutions investing substantial amounts of money into infrastructure for RWAs and going to bat for the industry, I think that's a sign that we're moving forward a bit. So to me, it feels very early in the cycle to that extent. But, as we've seen for the last few, I guess, 6 months or plus, it can get really choppy. There's times where everyone feels really good and it feels almost euphoric. And then there's times where it feels the exact opposite. So I think we're still in that kind of chop area where, the price action of a lot of different tokens is going to be up and down, but the overall sentiment seems to be building in the right direction.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about where we are in terms of the price of Bitcoin. I remember, last cycle, whenever we reached this area, whenever we were at its all-time high, it was very frothy, right? And now we're even higher than that, and it doesn't feel anywhere near where what we felt, last cycle. So it's very, very early. And I believe I saw something yesterday that in terms of the amount of time after the halving, we're up like 11%, and which is the highest, versus previous cycles since the halving. So it's very interesting to, to see that. And that this consolidation period can only mean good things for the future. I feel like, the more consolidation we have, potentially, the higher the market can go, the more volatile it is, which for a lot of people is exciting as well. Also, I feel like there's some emerging technologies that what we're experiencing here, and I feel like going through the satellite events and looking at all the titles, every other event seemed to be about DePIN. I got invited to a lot of DePIN events. There were panel discussions around DePIN. I'm curious to hear from you guys if you had to pick one narrative that really stood out to you at this conference. What would it be? Alberto, I'll start with you.
I think it would be, for me, it was a lot of real world assets and tokenization of financial instruments and even like real estate. That was like a lot of conversations I had about that, especially being at Bitwave. They need to account for all that. So I had a lot of those types of conversations, more than usual. And then one, I guess, vertical that was really interesting to me that I think has now entered the room is like medtech, health tech entering Web3. I know it's been there, but I think that was like a vertical that I was not expecting, was not on my bingo card to hear so much about.
Interesting you say about medtech, because I feel like Vivek Ramaswamy, who was running for president and obviously fell short, but very well known figure in the space and very much about blockchain technology, even talks about that as a use case. So I do think that the future looks promising, and I'm sure that from your perspective, being at Bitwave, there's a lot of accounting and tax aspects to consider. But
I
that's
think it's
interesting.
I think for, like on the health medtech side, I think it's yeah, there's going to be tax accounting. I'm not sure what strategies and how that would work out right now, because I mean a lot of it is like HIPAA and stuff like that. So I'm kind of curious to go down that path and work with a project like that soon.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe that could be a reason why that narrative hasn't really quite taken off just yet. But that's
Yeah.
why, people like you focusing on and supporting these types of projects could potentially dictate whether that becomes like a real, mature narrative in the future. So you mentioned RWAs and you mentioned biotech. That's
Yeah.
interesting to hear. Kobe, what are your thoughts? What was like the one narrative that really stood out to you?
Man, I don't know if it's a narrative, but it's the underlying current of this war that's still out there and brewing of the layer one competition. Not only do you have the booths of like, Avalanche and Hedera, who I saw there back in 2018, 19, even further before that. But you have the Trons, you have the new layer ones who are looking to compete with those guys. And then if you're with the network I roll with, you're talking to about 20 different blockchain layer one solutions fully in stealth mode. I mean, some of them kind of out there, some of them from the Facebook team are out there building and just not promoting themselves yet. They're going to be the ones buying out the booths next year, I think, which have the big, layer one signs. And I love to talk to all these layer ones. I mean, take Tron, for example. They're one of the most scrutinized layer ones out there. And I went up to their team and just asked, what's your plan? What are you doing not only to, with such a name for yourself, stand up to these regulations while bringing in new builders, new projects, but compete with the new kids on the block who promise a throughput of 7 billion transactions per nanosecond. I mean, there's some promises I think we're going to see really tried and tested in the next wave of innovation. But I really think that the layer ones are still where you need to have the conversations to understand where are the community builders coming in who used to be the blockchain, Bitcoin core developers? Where's that innovation focusing? And Alberto, you're totally right that real world asset protocols and DePIN are being developed by, again, the crowd that used to be at those Deloitte stands, but also just the community teams who got their developer passes and are starting to really work on some decentralized protocols. So I always go to the layer ones and just say, hey, what are you working on? And as a wallet, how do we take the best of who's building on your chain and ship it directly to the user? Because often there's no one to help package it up and put some polish on it. And that's something we try to do. But these layer ones, I mean, they're also where you're going to find those 4 or 5-year-old members in terms of how long they've been with the team, who just know where the space was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, and usually can dictate where it's going in 2 or 3 years with the money they can push into projects, developers, and more. So my narrative is talk to the layer ones, trust the layer ones, be skeptical of the layer ones, and kind of dig in every time we can get the chance.
Your perspective is very interesting on this, Kobe, because you are a wallet, and so in a way, you do kind of tend to think like an investor as you're talking to these projects. You're thinking, okay, is this L1? Does it have a shot of making it through this market? Right? Will it be around for the next market or the market after that? So your perspective is very interesting on this. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you could give me 3 layer ones that really shined this conference, who really stood out to you?
I'll say I'm biased first off, but I got to talk about Quai, who's a team out of Austin who's been building this new type of protocol that's proof of work, but has a dual token model that not only are they like deep into the woodwork of fully fleshing out in technical design, but they're investing the same amount of resources into community support and their own projects as to how they can educate people about this double token model and the proof of entropy that they're putting out. I mean, you go up to their stand and you're talking to a few professors from the University of Texas, and you're also talking to people flying in from around the country who are motivated and ready to kind of propagate this new layer one, which hasn't even launched yet. The second pick, I guess I would say, is probably Tron, because I went up and said, okay, you got everyone staring at you, the lawyers from the SEC, everyone is kind of looking at you since you just moved from China to Singapore. What have you been doing in the past years to prepare? And if you look at their hiring, you look at their team structure, they've been investing in the US based team, members who are starting to bring on a lot of developers working in all these different sectors. And they're one of the teams that has had to find the most legitimate projects to bring onto their blockchain since they're going to be looked at so, detailed by all these regulators. My third pick, I think just because they're an oldie but a goodie, is probably Hedera. And again, I'm not saying what I think is going to go up in price or down in price or anything like this, but Hedera is still at it, incentivizing development on their mainnet, incentivizing new innovations and trying to compete with these layer 2 and now layer 3 and layer 0 solutions. So they're really still trying to push the envelope as to what an L1 from 2018 can really deploy and bring onto their network now. So those are three of the names that really made me excited about the layer ones we get to work with and have continued partnerships with since we started working with them as far back as 2016, 17.
Thanks, Kobe. Hedera has come out swinging when it comes to partnerships, but it'd be interesting to see how those partnerships actually play out. And to your point on Quai, I had Alan on the show, and they reposted our interview, and that community went bananas. So they have a very strong community. I know that for a fact because I have experienced it. So it's interesting to to hear your perspective, and so Tron, Quai, and Hedera. That's good to know, and I'll keep that in mind for sure. Max, what are your thoughts? I know you and we've talked about DePIN quite a few times. You've named a few projects on the show. Did the DePIN narrative really stand out to you at Consensus, or was there something else that really kind of took hold of your attention?
I would say DePIN still stood out to an extent. There was still a lot of discussions and panels around it. And same with RWAs. I thought RWAs had a huge presence at this conference. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of institutional kind of adoption. A lot of them see RWAs as a way for them to tap into this market in ways that are probably a lot harder for a small team to do. For example, I don't know if you saw the news the other day about, I think it was BlackRock and Citadel are considering basically spinning up a rival exchange to the New York Stock Exchange. To me, that seems like a play to basically help back their RWAs, right? They have a little bit more control at that point, and they can actually have exchanges where they can potentially even trade some of these things. So that was very interesting to me, the RWAs having a rise. And then AI, as we've probably seen across like the social media side, but I saw a pretty big presence on that end as well. A lot of projects are really starting to lead into the AI narrative. Whether they're actually building projects that will take advantage of it or not is hard to tell. But a lot of people are trying to incorporate that into their narrative. And that was something that I guess isn't surprising either. But I'd be interested to see what the real use cases are. And it kind of does tie into deep into a way. If you look at things like Akash, they have these GPUs and things you can utilize for things like AI. And so therefore that gives them a lot of intrinsic value, I think. So that was probably the most notable ones. And then one thing I actually noticed that was very lacking that was super prevalent at like ETH Denver was restaking. Did not hear much about restaking much at all, or really much on the security narrative. So that was interesting to me that narrative's kind of come and go. And I wouldn't say it's gone, but at least at this conference, there just wasn't a whole lot of discussion around it or hype around the products being built.
Do you think on the restaking side, do you think that has anything to do with the regulation and Gary being against the staking aspect with like say Ethereum? Could that play a role in the lack of, the attention on that vertical?
I mean, it certainly could be an aspect to it, but really it just seems like that just wasn't the focal point of this conference. And I think it does go back to just the different, I guess, audiences that attend the conferences. I think, like you mentioned, Denver is probably a bit more of a developer focused conference, and therefore there's a lot of discussion around the protocol security and how you can basically utilize things like AVS and Eigenlayer. Whereas this was much more focused on, I guess, new technologies and more consumer facing things that could actually bring in more adoption to blockchain space. When you get into these discussions about, sharding and security and restaking, I think you lose a lot of, your typical consumers because they're just not familiar with either these terms or these concepts. So yeah, at a conference like this, I think it does make sense to just avoid those and focus on the things that are more easily digestible by the audience that typically attends.
So perhaps if we read between the lines, it may appear that institutions are not quite ready yet for the restaking, and it's still more of a retail thing, which, retail isn't here yet. So, but when they do appear, perhaps that could be a narrative for the retail side, but not so much on the institutional side.
Well, and I'd also argue that the retail side may not be that interested either. I think it's really more focused on the developers and the people building in the space more or less than it is going to be the users that come and use the products. And I think that's just because a user is more about the actual, consumer facing apps and the user experience. They're not really too concerned about the underlying tech or the underlying things happening underneath these applications that are making them run. And I think that's pretty apparent with how we utilize things now like our iPhones and other sorts of technology is most people have no idea how it works. They just know it works as intended. And that's really good enough.
And one other question that I have, and I'll open this up to anybody that has any thoughts on this, but the whole meme coin narrative, I know it's really hot right now, despite the fact that we don't have a lot of retail. Being that this conference was very institutional focused, did you still see any traction around meme coins? Were they talking about meme coins on Solana or on Base or any specific meme coins that are, doing really well right now, like Pepe, for instance?
I went into consensus a bit doubtful that these were really helping the crypto narrative or ecosystem. Then again, I came into crypto as a Dogecoin buyer, not being a financial anarchist, but just thought that Dogcoin money was cool and fun. So that's what brought me in. And I actually had a thought during consensus that we're kind of better protecting consumers who may have entered these ICOs or DeFi projects a few years ago, thinking that they might have gains or see increases to their holdings. I think that when you're buying something like Dog with a Hat or Elon meme coin 205 or whatever you call it, retail consumers are a little bit more aware of saying, okay, if I put $100 here, I might be kissing these $100 goodbye. I might be making Tesla's worth of gains. So I think that actually we've taken a bit away from these people trying to put these cryptos out, trying to get these retail consumers invested in something that might not happen. And we've made it a bit more realistic of saying, okay, you're not investing in a scam, but you're investing in something really intangible and it might go up, might go down, who knows? So I actually thought it was really cool to see a lot of people who may have been adverse, like myself, start to embrace meme coins as kind of a staple and part of crypto that has more so found its place, less so been just a factor that you have to deal with or navigate around. So I like it. I think it's a growing sector. I don't know if it's going to be $1 trillion market, but I definitely think there's room for it on the internet, given how many people are excited about Dogecoin still, including myself. So I'm not selling my bag from 2013. We're going to ride it up.
Right. When Jim Cramer mentions meme coins on CNBC, that's when you know, right?
Well, then you got to
Institutions are
sell.
probably
If
taking
he's for it, then you get really worried. But yes, we can agree partially there.
That's true. Inverse Kramer, we all know about that deal. Alberto, Max, any thoughts on the meme coin narrative at specifically consensus?
There was a presence. I mean, that was something that I did notice. There were side events that were kind of focused around Dog with Hat and some of these other, more notable meme coins. And I completely agree with what you just said, basically on the lines of it's good for adoption, because I think a lot of people understand exactly what it is and it's very speculative in nature. And they do know it's going to be very risky. And I think a lot of times people are just looking for volatility in the sense that they want to make big gains without having to put up a lot of time, effort, or capital. And so I think these meme coins kind of offer that to people, and some will call it the meme coin casino. And I think that's an excellent description of what it is because you really are entering a casino at that point. You might walk out with absolutely nothing. You might walk out with a bunch of money. But people are okay with that. And we're seeing that, I think, in like the broader trends that are happening, at least in the United States. We're seeing a huge boom in the amount of people who are doing like online sports gambling with the sports apps and some of these other really speculative type products. So I don't think it's much of a leap to go from, hey, I'm betting on these random outcomes of sporting events to, hey, I'm betting on the random outcome of this social kind of phenomenon. And you can really pick your winners based on how much you, I guess, relate to whatever that meme coin is. And if there's something that's very relatable about it, then there's a chance that other people might want to get in it too. And I've even noticed from my friends who most of my close friends from college and even beyond that, they don't care about crypto at all, really. They don't really quite understand it yet, and that's fine. But they will still sometimes reach out to ask me if I bought X, Y, or Z coin, or how do I get this coin? And it's almost always a meme coin, right? So in that sense, it does help with adoption and getting people in the door. But hopefully we can kind of move from that eventually to getting them more focused on the applications being built, and really explain to them the real use cases for blockchain and distributed ledgers as a whole. But if this is the way to at least get them in the door to start learning, then yeah, I think it's something we should embrace while it's here, and then move on once we have to.
Good point, Max. And I think Kobe is a prime example, right? Started off buying Dogecoin, and now he's a builder with Eucalyptus Labs and has his own wallet that he launched.
In 2013, I bought some of the Doge. 2014, I locked it away in a wallet called Koinami. Only started working there after using the wallet for 2 years, 2016. Left there 2021 to start my own stuff with most of the same team. And now we actually just got back to running Koinami. So now we're Eucalyptus Labs, we're Koala Wallet, we're Koinami Wallet, which is going to be relaunched soon with over 40 blockchains. I have to do the same shameless self-plug at some point. But yeah, Dogecoin is what brought me into crypto, brought me to my first real job since I was around 14, 15. And it's just kept bringing the real promises of crypto to light. So even though you tiptoe in and might not care about crypto when you buy that coin initially, maybe you learn something about self-custody or staking or lending or any of these little things along the way that really are fulfilling this promise of this decentralized tech can make your life better, which I think is the handshake agreement that we've always tried to propel forward from the white paper of, this decentralization. It's our job as the builders to prove and convince people around the world that it's true, that this is going to make your life better. Here's how. Click this button. And so, yeah, I just think it's really cool that Dogecoin is still the start to most of, I guess, the past 10 years of my life, which is a lot of my life. It's not just the good Botox editing. It's a lot of my life.
Yeah, it's prime example, right? As I mentioned. So it's I think people are starting to come around to that. Alberto, I wanted to get your perspective on this as well. As you were going around talking to some of these like enterprise level clients, are you still, were you still hearing some rumblings around meme coins?
Yeah, there's still some rumblings around meme coins. The dog with hat, the Bobby token. Was it the presidential candidate, Robert Kennedy, the Bobby token that they launched? They had a party, so I saw that around. But I agree with everything that Max and Kobe just laid out. Right, it's really an on ramp for new users to start learning about crypto and blockchain. And I started with Bitcoin, but I know a lot of my friends and family members, they always just hit me up about some random meme token. And then now this next wave, they started asking me about other stuff like, DeFi, staking, like what more can I do with it? I just don't want to hold it. So I think it's really opened that conversation, and I'm here for it.
Yes, we're all here for it. So it's definitely an exciting time. Before we get to the parting thoughts, guys, I want to have a little bit of fun with this last question. Based on what you've learned at Consensus, I want to hear some bold predictions, like some really bold predictions that may be a little bit outlandish, but if it happens, you wouldn't be completely 100% surprised.
I don't even know if this is a bold prediction, but I do think that crypto and blockchain is going to be a centerpiece of our upcoming election. I really think it's going to be what is going to drive one of the biggest voter bases, one way or the other, is how they interact and really how they plan to deal with crypto regulation. Because I think there's a ton of people, including institutions, who are waiting on the sideline, kind of waiting to know exactly what they can and can't do. And then you have some of the bigger ones like BlackRock who just don't care because they know they can fight anything they need to in court. But ultimately, I think it's going to be a major sticking point for this election, and we're going to have a ton of eyes and a ton of people kind of focusing in on the industry. So I think we'll see a pretty major upheaval of a large amount of tokens because of that. Some will get left behind, but ultimately, I do think we're going to be entering what we'd call like the bull run, and I think it's going to be kind of sparked by this discussion that's going to be had in the next 6 to however many months.
Yeah, and I think we just got done talking about meme coins. I think some of these Bowden, Trump tokens, I mean, that they're all going to be, it's probably going to be a lot more that are going to be active, whether people like it or not. But politics definitely going to play a key role. I do agree with you, Max. This regulatory stuff that's happening in the news, and Biden administration vetoing 121, and we also have the Fit 21. There's a lot of stuff happening on the regulatory side.
I think that discounting some of the USDT or stable coins that are there right now, I think that the top 30 is going to look very different from the top 30 in even a year from now. I think we're going to see a lot of numbers go up, a lot of numbers go down. I feel that the next events like Terra or the FTX scandals are going to look small compared to the things that will pass along as blips, as milestones to reaching the next price points and waves of innovation. Crypto has become so vast that you can have an exchange go under one day and the market goes up the next. You can have a token project implode on itself and the market says, well, that was just something in DePIN. Why do we care over every staking? We're doing fine. So I think that we're going to enter just such a diverse market of ideas and services in Bitcoin and blockchain that, again, the top 30, you might be looking at coinmarketcap.com and clicking, all right, top 30 assets or top 30 protocols or top 30. People are going to start to really refine the list that they look at once these market caps reach the numbers that we all have been putting under our pillows. So,
And just to quickly add to what Kobe just said, because I think he's spot on there, is yesterday I put out a tweet because they announced that Nvidia just reached a $3 trillion market cap. That is literally showcasing where we're at as an industry. The entire crypto market cap of all the crypto that exists currently is about 2.7 trillion, less than one publicly traded company on the stock exchange. Granted, it's one of the biggest ones, if not, I think it's like number two now. But ultimately, that just goes to showcase like how much growth, room for growth there is in this industry that you can literally look at one company being traded right now and it's worth more than the entire market that's currently being circulated. So to me, that just shows we have a lot of room to go.
Yeah, that puts things in perspective a lot. And yeah, I do remember seeing that tweet. I had no idea until I saw it. So Max always coming in hot with the alpha. Love it. Alberto, what do you think? Give me your bold prediction.
I think if the ETH is going to skyrocket, and maybe even higher than 10,000 or something this next bull cycle. And the reason I say that is because BlackRock is coming in heavy, right? Like I was looking at an article earlier. BlackRock seeded their Bitcoin ETF with 100,000 or something like that, and now they're seeding their Ethereum ETF with a minimum of 2 million. So that's like 20x more than what they did with the Bitcoin ETF. And I think now it's going to start getting really interesting, especially with Ethereum and all these L2s that are building on it. And I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, I think Van Eck came out with a price prediction of 22,000 by 2030. Personally, I think that's a little bit conservative, but like, well, nobody here is can tell the future, right? We love the tech, and that's why we do what we do, and the rest will follow, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
And I actually have one more bold claim here because it kind of Alvaro made me kind of think this is potentially, but
All
and I
right,
think
how's that
Ethereum
gonna go? All
can
right.
still go, but I'm gonna go ahead and say that Solana flips Ethereum in the next couple of years, if not this cycle.
that's
I just
bold.
really, it is bold, but I do think it could happen because of this whole idea of the layer twos that are going to continue to siphon not only liquidity but market cap from Ethereum, whereas Solana's kind of one integrated system that is really capturing people and it gives the people, I think, what more consumers want, which is fast execution, fast finality, and really just cheap transaction fees.
I do have a follow-up question to that, Max. Do you think that in order for that to happen, do we need a sole ETF?
Yes, 100%. Like it would require it to get the same type of attention, obviously, that Ethereum's got from the institutional side. But I think they're next up, right? Like if you go down the list, it kind of is Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then I would have to say at this point Solana. So once that happens, I think it's going to open up a ton of opportunity, and I think a lot of retail, when you think like Robinhood traders and people, I guess, who are not your traditional traders, they're going to want to go for the next hot thing and try to catch the next 100,000x, whatever it is. And Solana seems to be like the easy use case, and it's doing a great job of integrating with like the pop culture side of things. So to me, those are two really important things you're going to have to do if you want to see mass adoption. And I think as someone who used to be a very big Solana hater, I've now come around to see that they've survived a lot of different things, chain halt, centralization, all sorts of things, and they just continue to go higher and get more adoption. So to me, that's a really, really bullish signal.
So on that topic, I have a question for Alberto because Alberto at Bitwave, you talk to a lot of enterprise level clients, huge names. Some of them we probably can't mention on the show. It's okay. But is anybody talking about building on Solana, or is this more on the retail side?
I see it's a lot of Solana interest, especially from institutions. I look at my Solana PayPal hat that I got at Consensus, right? PayPal is just not now their first or their second chain is Solana, right? And they're choosing it for a reason, right? Other than Ethereum, and now even like Coinbase Prime, Coinbase Custody, or any of these other exchanges, they're going to be looking to support the stablecoin. I believe there's about 15 or 20 of them that are doing it right now, and it's all on Solana. So I think these institutions are going to be, building on it, especially even like Team. If I'm not mistaken, like the new whole Helium mobile was all merged with Solana a few years ago. So like a lot of this stuff is still being built on Solana and continue growing. Shopify, I think they have a integration with Solana as well. Yeah, I do see a lot of institutional adoption and just a lot of traders.
So it's not just the retail that's that's in having fun. It seems like the institutions are wanting to get into the mix as well. Well, Max, we see what you did here with your bold prediction. You started a whole conversation. Kobe, before we end this chat, I do want to give you an opportunity to, do you have any comments around soul flipping Ethereum?
Actually, I'm too scared that whatever I say the opposite has to happen after the times I've sold either Ethereum or Solana into one another. It's a forbidden pair for me. I'm surprised Gensler hasn't slapped the phone out of my hand when I used to make those trades at home. I could tell you that I think Doge is going to flip everything if you really want a head turner, but no, I'm a little bit doubtful or skeptical rather of a Solana ETF. Unless if we see quite a few cryptocurrencies or an exchange get some kind of different or new regulatory license, which is possible if there's a company sponsored by or part of BlackRock, one of the big boys, to really push that forward. But even then, I think we're a bit too slow in terms of just the regulation environment to move. I think it's really important that everything we think right now about the US government's take on crypto, like Max said, could be heavily influenced by this next election cycle. I fear that what may have been a polarizing issue before of right versus left, of who wants crypto, who doesn't, is actually going to be a bit obfuscated. And instead, each candidate is going to go out there and say, we love crypto, we want crypto, we both really are pro-crypto, therefore making it less of an issue. And therefore, the regulators are like, all right, we don't have to do anything. If everyone's against crypto, don't have to touch it. If everyone's pro-crypto, don't have to touch it either. We can just pretend that the candidates might one day do something which they won't. So I think that's actually my fear of the bear trap, or rather the bull market trap. But we'll have to see. I just threw a lot more into the conversation. But Solana Ethereum or Ethereum Solana, I won't put my curse on that today.
This is why I love a healthy debate. And gentlemen, thank you so much for participating in this conversation. I do want to be respectful of your time. So on that note, let's go ahead and just share some parting thoughts. What are you working on? Obviously, you went to consensus for a reason. Feel free to share what you guys are working on. Alberto, I'll start with you.
Cool. Yeah, I'm business development and partnerships. I'm at Bitwave, and what we do is we do digital asset accounting and on-chain payments for B2B. So we'll take on-chain data as well as off-chain through exchanges, custodians, and sync it with traditional ERPs like QuickBooks, NetSuite, Workday. Our end users are accountants, bookkeepers, finance professionals that need to do financial reporting, treasury management. And we got some exciting things on the roadmap right now. And if anybody's at Bitcoin Nashville, we'll be doing an event, especially for those finance professionals. Feel free to reach out.
Thanks so much, Alberto. Kobe?
Check out Koala Wallet and or Koinami Wallet. We're going to have a few things that are coming out that really help you put the power back in your hand as a wallet user, instead of using all the apps that are kind of being manipulated by the big players out there. So just follow at Kobe Lazar, KOBYLAZAR, on the cute koala logo on Twitter, and I'll keep you updated right there.
Thanks, Kobe. And last but not least, Max.
Yeah, so I'm working on Archway, and what we're really trying to do is kind of refocus on the application layer. We see that as the place where value is actually being driven and where consumer users will come and actually interact with the chain. And so we try to design a incentive structure and protocol that not only rewards the applications in ways that is a little bit more substantial, but also to give them the tools, documentation, and everything else to be able to build those applications. And also really focused on the economics of the protocol and the token, just because a lot of times you can build a great app, but if the layer one's token is not built in a way that's sustainable, it can actually hinder your ability to grow. So that's another thing we focused on quite a bit. And yeah, that would be one of my hot takes as well. It's that the application layer is really going to be what drives people here. So a lot of chains, I think, need to realize that it's not about the infrastructure as much as it's about giving the applications the infrastructure and tools they need to build the consumer-facing apps that will ultimately drive adoption.
Amazing insight, guys. Yeah, really enjoyed this, and thanks so much for giving everybody a front row seat into consensus, which As I said in the beginning of the conversation, a lot of times what happens at these conferences will dictate what happens in the market. And you guys are some of the most active individuals that are out and about, shaking hands, learning, and it was a great conversation with you all. So thanks so much, and until next time.